Hello and a very warm welcome to Bharata First. You're watching Big Picture with Frank Rausen Pereira. Voicing grave concern over violence and bloodshed in Afghanistan, India said on Tuesday that there is need for a genuine double peace in and around the war-torn country and asked the negotiating parties to engage in good faith with a serious commitment towards reaching a political solution. Addressing the ninth Heart of Asia Ministerial Conference in Tajikistan's capital, Dushanbe, External Affairs Minister S Jaishankar also said that India has been supportive of all the efforts being made to accelerate the dialogue between the Afghan government and the Taliban, including intra-Afghan negotiations. Jaishankar said that if the peace process is to be successful, then it is necessary to ensure that the negotiating parties continue to engage in good faith with a serious commitment towards reaching a political solution. In this edition of Big Picture, we will analyze the Heart of Asia Conference and what's at stake for Afghanistan. Joining me on the program today are Ashok Sajjanhar, former ambassador, General Shashi Asthana, retired strategic analyst, and Amlindu Mishra, Department of Politics, Lancaster University. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of Big Picture. Ambassador, let me begin the program with you first. Let's first understand and analyze the key takeaways from the Heart of Asia Summit.
Well, as it has been mentioned, this is the ninth edition of the Heart of Asia Summit. It was started in Istanbul in 2011, and it's been meeting virtually every year after that. And basically, the objective is to bring peace and stability in Afghanistan. There are about 15 members of this grouping, and India had its own summit at the foreign ministers level in 2016 that took place in Amritsar. This is particularly important because right now we are really close to the end game as far as Afghanistan is concerned. Because, of course, there has been turmoil and upheavals in Afghanistan for the last 40 years. But United States came here in 2001 after the 9/11 attacks. And that was the global war on terror. And the United States has been invested in Afghanistan trying to bring peace, security, stability here. And it has realized that it has not been able to do so. The realization came quite some time ago. In fact, even when Barack Obama was fighting the elections, he said that the American troops need to disengage and need to come back. And the same thing was he brought back some troops after he got a surge which really increased the number of troops in Afghanistan to about 140,000 in 2011. And then when Mr. Trump came, he said that all the troops must be removed, and he signed this agreement on 29th of February last year, basically saying that all the troops, about 10,000 US troops, will go back by the 1st of May 2021 in 14 months. And there were certain conditions that were imposed on the Taliban. This was an agreement signed not with the Afghan government, but with the Taliban, who had been inflicting violence and who had been expanding the territory under their control over these last many years. And the three conditions basically were that they would cut off all their links with the terrorist groups like Haqqani network, like Al-Qaeda, like ISIS. Number two, that they would enter into meaningful negotiations with the Afghan government or with a group that of Afghan people, and try to come to some sort of a transitional government which could ensure peace and stability. And the last was that there would be decrease in violence. Now, unfortunately, none of this has been achieved over the last so many months. So here, when we are talking about at the Heart of Asia conference, it is that the American troops, which have been providing stability to the Afghan government in Kabul, to the Ashraf Ghani government, they are going to withdraw by 1st May or maybe a little later, because that's what both the Secretary of State Antony Blinken said, that there is going to be a review, and after that he sent a letter to the Afghan president and also to Mr. Abdullah, who's heading this negotiations with the Taliban. And also Mr. Biden, after his first press conference, he let out some confusing signals as to whether the withdrawal will take place on the 1st of May or later. So here basically the negotiations were as to what happens, how can we bring peace and stability and security, and what sort of a government, a transitional government, should it come in Afghanistan, or it should be any other form in which Taliban, of course, will get associated. So it is still very confusing, but, and you have rightly named your program as the Afghanistan Conundrum, because it really does appear to be a conundrum. So that is what discussions have taken place, but India's interests are clear. How we are going to achieve them, I think that is still a little uncertain. Frank.
Absolutely. Right, Ambassador General, let me bring you into the picture now. Let's look at what's happening in the region. What's the situation on the ground like? How much have things changed of late, really, in Afghanistan?
See, if you look at the strategic picture, firstly is the location of Afghanistan and the location of Heart of Asia that makes it quite peculiar, because Afghanistan of late has been the center of violence and has also become a largest conglomeration of the terror groups in the world, almost, because the number of terror groups which are there are the ones which America wanted to reduce them to size at some point of time. Americans, when they entered Afghanistan, they had one war aim, that no terror group should be strong enough to go and hit their mainland. Now, at this stage, we find that after 20 years and 2 trillions amount of money and 20,000 for 2,500 soldiers gone, Taliban still holds more territory than what it was holding earlier, number one. Number two, the peace, of course, is nowhere in sight, but that was actually not the aim to that extent as well. Because I'm of a firm opinion that peace in Afghanistan, and no foreign prescription can work on peace in Afghanistan. All foreign players, whether it is the large players or it is the regional players, everybody has stakes and everybody has interests. Now, let's talk of the Indian requirement. From Indian point of view, Afghanistan is very important from the connectivity to Central Asian republics, as well as our security, because a large number of terror groups are inimical to our interest, whether it is ISKP or it is Al-Qaeda in South Asia, or some other groups which have linkages with the terror groups of Pakistan. A UN report says 6,500 Pakistani terrorists are floating around in Afghanistan. So this is the situation as far as the terrorists are concerned. Now, coming on to the Taliban and the peace deal which the Joe Biden administration has tried to give out. Now, it is, in my opinion, a non-starter for the simple reason of Taliban. They don't believe in constitution. They say it's a legacy of the West. They don't believe in the elections, because they say, no, that's not our process. We have an Islamic system of working and system of governance. And Abdullah has been saying that I am ready to hand over to the next elected government. As far as India is concerned, we would like to see an Afghan-owned, Afghan-elected, democratic, sovereign government and inclusive government, which takes care of all the factions which exist in Afghanistan, because that, in our opinion, gives maximum chances of peace, whether it is Hazaras or Pashtuns or Tajiks or a whole lot of other groups as well. Today, as the question which you have asked is, there are various groups in various portions of Afghanistan controlling various portions, and there is certainly the Afghan government controls a limited portion of Afghanistan. And another factor which has come up, which is a major game changer, and that has also made US think, is the China factor. That China $400 billion deal and with Iran, and then looking for an alternate route right up to Iran. That is an alternate CPEC kind of activity. Also, rare earth and the narco money and things like that. They've got a lot of interest now, Chinese. So therefore, what has happened is, there is a thought that can you give this strategic space to Chinese and Pakistanis to their making merry on the plate. So it will be amount to almost a walkover by United States. So this is the situation which is coming up. Certainly, you have rightly said in your beginning that it is a conundrum. So obviously, I think we will have to perhaps decode a little more as we get closer to 1st May.
Absolutely. Amlin Mishra, let me bring you to the picture now. You know, we've spoken, the two gentlemen prior to you on this program have already spoken about the various stakeholders, really, as far as Afghanistan is concerned. Let's focus on the United States for the time being, because they've played a major role over the last 2 decades. Now, with the change of administration in the United States, what really changes on the ground in Afghanistan with Joe Biden helming the ship now?
Well, let's look at the facts. At the height of US engagement in Afghanistan, we had around 140,000 US troops. Now that has been reduced substantially to 2,500 troops over the years. That's number one. Number two, United States has been involved in Afghanistan for the last 20 years. In fact, it is the longest US military engagement outside ever. That's number two. Number three, United States has not been able to achieve its objectives that it had set out from the very beginning. As our other two speakers have already highlighted, Afghanistan continues to be the playground of various terrorist factions from all over the world. So United States hasn't achieved what it set out to achieve 20 years back. And the taxpayers have realized that it is a quagmire from which the sooner the Americans extricate themselves, the better. And this takes us back to the old saying that Afghanistan is the graveyard of empires. We have seen that successively throughout history, the British India, then the Soviets, now the Americans. So the reckoning is that you simply cannot plant peace there. It is too fractious a society. It is too fractious a country. And whoever goes there, tries to do good, is going to come back completely wounded. So that is the reckoning on the American administration. So there is something common between the previous Republican administration and the current Democratic administration, is that the sooner we get out of Afghanistan, the better. So what we have in the context of current administration of Joe Biden is divide and quit. When you talk about divide and quit, what I suggest here is that they are not very interested in giving much importance to the current Afghan government. Because if you look at the peace process that took place in Doha, Qatar in February 2020, it involved United States and the Taliban. It did not include the current government. So the current government has got very little say in terms of how the future is going to unfold. So when you talk about United States leaving, they really cannot be bothered as to what happens to the government that is in place. As we all know, Taliban at the moment controls almost 2/3 of the territory in Afghanistan. And the stranglehold of the current government is limited to Kabul and the nearby areas. So the moment American troops leave, they are going to come and take over Kabul. That's the reality. And the Americans do realize that. Now let's talk about what options do Americans have. As Mr. Ambassador has already highlighted, the current administration of Joe Biden is hopscotching so far as extricating the American troops from Afghanistan is concerned. They are saying that 1st of May deadline, maybe not. Now, how is Taliban going to respond to it? The Taliban are impatient. They want the foreign troops out, and they want the foreign troops out by 1st of May. And that is unlikely to happen. And what we have seen is that Americans have realized the Taliban are being spoiled sports. Although they had said that we are going to reduce our violence, what we have seen is targeted violence in civilian population, which has gone over 30 to 40%. So there is a linear violence all across Afghanistan, and they don't even want to recognize the current democratically elected government. So United States has very little room to maneuver, and it has to leave, and then it becomes free for all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Talking about the present situation, Ambassador, and considering how complex it is, how there are so many players really, all vying for a piece of the pie, what are India's options? What should we do?
I think a couple of things, Frank. One, as far as Afghanistan is concerned and the region, it is extremely significant for India, not only in terms of trade, not only in terms of connectivity, but I think even more in terms of peace and security in India. We are all aware of what happened as far as the IC-814 in 1999 when it was hijacked from Nepal to Amritsar and then to Kandahar in the south east of Afghanistan. And then after that, we have seen, as far as our own embassy is concerned, as far as our own consulates in Afghanistan are concerned, they have been the target of attack by the Taliban forces and by other terrorist groups there. So security is vital as far as India is concerned. And that is why we have been focusing on peace and stability and security in Afghanistan. In addition to that, of course, India has invested very heavily in Afghanistan. It's been more than $3 billion, and across the board, we have reached out to Afghanistan, whether it is the parliament building, whether it is the Salma Dam, what is now called the Afghanistan-India Friendship Dam, or it is in terms of transportation, the Zaranj-Delaram Road, it is the transmission line in Pule Khumri, and now Shatu Dam, your $270 odd million, which will bring more of drinking water to Kabul. So I think across the board, and then of course there has been training of India of defense forces in terms of training of Afghan personnel, of civil society, entrepreneurs, in terms of education, healthcare under our Vaccine Maitri initiative. So across the board, we have been supporting Afghanistan, and our interest and intent would be that this investment that we have, it should be protected, it should be promoted, and it should be further enhanced. In addition to that, so to improve connectivity, since we do not get access to Afghanistan through Pakistan at the moment, and although de jure we have contiguous borders with Afghanistan, with the Wakhan corridor, but because the Gilgit-Baltistan area and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir continues to be under the control of Pakistan, we are not able to access Afghanistan from the side of the Wakhan corridor. So to circumvent that, we have been trying to promote the Chabahar port. That has been going reasonably well, although over the last few years, because of the withdrawal by the United States from the Iranian nuclear deal, we have really not been able to make as much progress in that as we could have or we should have. So I think once with you asked Dr. Misra about what can the Biden presidency, what can it mean for Afghanistan. I think if the tensions between Iran and the United States come down a little bit, that will also definitely help us to get more actively engaged in Chabahar, and in terms of constructing the railway line from Chabahar to Zahedan to the border with Afghanistan. So I think connectivity, trade, commerce, because there are, whether it is iron ore, we have invested in the iron ore mines in Afghanistan, or it is trade. We have started air freight corridors from Afghanistan from Kabul to Delhi and to Mumbai. So I think across the board, there are huge interests with Afghanistan. Afghanistan is a neighbor. We have historical, cultural, civilizational, linguistic connections with Afghanistan.
Sure.
And so we need to ensure our relations. And going forward, I think we have excellent relations with the government in Kabul. Now, because we can see the writing on the wall, that Taliban is going to be a part of the ruling dispensation in Kabul. I think I'm sure we have already established links with the Taliban, but we need to further activate them. India has very good connections with all the other ethnic communities, whether the Hazaras or the Tajiks, Pashtuns, of
Sure.
course. But we need to further strengthen. We have been inviting the leaders of those communities to India, and we need to further strengthen our political outreach to Afghanistan also. Frank.
Absolutely, absolutely. General, let's also talk about China and Pakistan, because they really want to play a big role in Afghanistan, and clearly Pakistan wants to keep India out and wants India nowhere close to Afghanistan. In such a situation, how do we go about tackling and handling these two neighbors of ours?
As far as tackling Pakistan and China in context of Afghanistan is concerned, certainly our idea of non-interference in Pakistan, in Afghanistan's internal affairs has paid, because most of the groups there, including the Afghan government, everybody is friendly to Indian efforts, which the ambassador mentioned at length, because even Taliban, when in power, they also want an Indian efforts as far as nation building is concerned, as far as governance is concerned, as far as aids are concerned. They also would like to do that. And they also indicated, when the Talibans were contacted in some manner, I think they did indicate that we have no interest in Kashmir, because there was a rumor in between that, okay, Taliban is saying, okay, first here and then Kashmir and things like that. But that was, they clarified in that manner. So that's one issue. The second thing is that certainly there is a big power game on, because we would have loved US to get back to JCPOA, that is the Iran deal. We would have loved doing business with Iran again. And we would have loved processing this corridor from Chabahar and right up to Tajikistan. You see, from Tajikistan, if you the shortest route to warm water is via the route which I just mentioned. Even our permanent mission in United Nations, he highlighted that Afghanistan needs a warm water access, and so does the CAR. And that is why this international north-south transport corridor, a bifurcation of which can also be given to Afghanistan in some manner via Iran, all these become important. So for us, certainly we need to do the capacity building of Afghanistan in all forms, whether it is in terms of military hardware, whether it is in terms of training, whether it is in terms of logistics, whether it is in terms of perhaps giving some military hardware by itself in prepared condition. And of course, the health initiatives have given a lot of goodwill to us in over and above what China has done. Now, another thing is that we have been able to somehow convince Afghanistan that our efforts in Afghanistan, they are benign and are not attached with various kinds of interests, as has been the case with Pakistan and China. Now, in Pakistan, there's no doubt that Taliban regime at some point of time was shielded by Pakistan. And when the international forces, when they actually removed Taliban from the seat, at that point of time, the shelter was given by Pakistan. Now, that was one part of it. But subsequently, when Taliban regime came to power, they did not compromise on durand line with Pakistan. So it is not that Taliban will follow everything what Pakistan says. So there is a silver lining there, because I am given to understand that most of these tribes, they are also patriot to Afghanistan, although they have a different ideology, that they want Sharia law, they want Islamic traditions, they want to govern in the manner in which we may not subscribe to. But the question is, they certainly don't want to give away their land to Pakistan also and get dominated by Pakistan. So these are some of the things. The terror links are also there. And there also, I think we need to work a lot. We need to work a lot with Americans, because for America, either if you lose this strategic space, then you have no strategic space in the entire Middle East, in the entire AFPAC region, you don't have anything. Then in the Iraq, Syria, all these places, I think there is a vacuum being created. And therefore, let's say hypothetically, if Al-Qaeda becomes strong or ISIS becomes strong, and they are able to conduct one more attack in American soil, then America will have serious problems. And that is one of the reasons you would have seen that Joe Biden is also trying to open up with Pakistan. He's not giving them, although Pakistan has not given them much help, but still he wants to keep the channels open, because if they have to do anything subsequently in Afghanistan, the logistic channel is through Pakistan only. Now, there is always a question asked by us that boots on ground, should it be there or should it not be there? Earlier, when it was asked, we had said, no, it has to be a blueberry operation. There have been stabilization operations by United Nations all over the world. Afghanistan is a fit case for stabilization operation. So, therefore, I think stabilization missions are required, number one. Number two, boots on ground for India, it doesn't suit, for the simple reason because a large force cannot be maintained unless you have a ground-based logistic system. Aero bridge cannot sustain large force. And today we don't have a vulnerability. Our entire forces are together. We don't want to create a vulnerability as a principle of war in the long term by going there. So these are, I think, some of the issues which I thought I'll highlight. Back to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Amalendra, let me bring you in now. Let's also talk about what's at stake as far as the other players in the region is concerned, and what's on the line for all of them.
Well, let's again focus on the facts on the ground. Afghanistan happens to be an Islamic country, and most of the players who are involved in one way or the other are Islamic countries. So there is that thing in common. Turkey wants to play a big role because it has got much stronger cultural ties to Afghanistan than India does. Iran is an immediate neighbor. In some ways, Islamic religion also helps in there. It has a massive Hazara Shia population in Afghanistan, so that helps. Pakistan has been already covered by others. Then let's talk about Central Asian states such as Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and others. So although, however hard we are going to say that India is indispensable to Afghanistan's future, if we are being absolutely honest, brutally honest, then we realize that we have very little room to maneuver so far as the realities are concerned. Now let's talk about the relationship between the Taliban and India. There is no love lost between these two actors. We have a history, and that is that we supported the Northern Alliance, and we made sure that the Taliban is undermined. And they are not going to forget that all of a sudden. They haven't forgiven the current government in Afghanistan. So why should we believe that they are going to extend an olive branch to us, given the fact that all the good things that we have done in terms of infrastructure, in terms of parliament, in terms of water, and so on and so forth? They are a brutal power. The brutality is reflected day in and day out in Afghanistan. So to expect that they are going to have a very good relationship with India is something of a daydream. So where do other actors come into play here? Pakistan is going to be the spoiler, and given that it has got a very strong role in terms of ISI, it is going to continue playing that. Turkey I have already mentioned in terms of Pakistan and Turkic relationship. So they are going to have a bigger stake. Iran is coming into the orbit of that. So is China. Now let's talk about why India is going to be pushed out. The railway line that India had promised to build between Chabahar and Jaidan has now been taken back by the regime in Tehran. They're saying that you didn't invest in it, so we are going to take it back, and they're going to build it themselves. So we are pushed out from there. We don't even know what the Chabahar future is going to be like, especially after China has promised a $400 billion US package. So India doesn't have that degree of economic muscle. Although we might have an air base in Tajikistan, although we might have a very good relationship with other Khanates, other Central Asian republics, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are going to get access to Afghanistan in the same way. Now, let's talk a little more about China. China is eyeing Afghanistan for its mineral resources. The latest report suggests that it has got something around 3 trillion US dollar natural resources under its grounds in terms of precious stones, other metals, and so on and so forth. So the way the Chinese are taking over territory after territory, they are going to have a big stake in Afghanistan in the coming years. And given the fact that they don't ask any questions, they won't have any issues whatsoever whether Taliban regime is going to follow the democratic principles or not, so long as their mining operations are allowed to continue. So what we are going to say, forgive me for being pessimist here, but it's on the cards, it's written on the cards, and that is that the China-Pakistan economic corridor and the Silk Road that China has been promoting is going to go through Afghanistan, and the United States is giving it up. Let's be very clear about it. There is very little appetite in Washington to continue with their Afghan adventure. 20 years is far longer time. They simply can't be bothered. If they want to get rid of any kind of terrorist organizations or outfits, they can do that through air power, through their drones, as they have been doing it against the Iranian interest and so on and so forth. So Americans, although they might come into some kind of agreement with Iran, it would be unlikely to see that they are going to support any kind of Indian position in Afghanistan in the long run. So we have to take, therefore, into account what our foreign minister just said yesterday, that it has to be a double peace. So I was trying to read between the lines. What is it that he's suggesting? He's saying that peace has to be within Afghanistan as well as in the neighborhood regions as well. So that goes on to suggest that India is not giving up altogether. India can become a spoiler. It has been a spoiler when the Taliban was in power. So the golden day of age of Indian intervention in Afghanistan has been in the last 20 years. But if its interests are undermined, I won't be surprised if New Delhi goes back to those particular period when it was intervening in Afghanistan's affairs as a spoiler.
All right, taking the discussion forward now, let's get closing comments from all the panelists with the best way forward. Starting first with you, Ambassador.
Yeah, coming at this stage, I tend to agree with the other panelists that India has a few cards in its hand. And that's a fact because as I mentioned earlier also that, we do not have contiguous borders. If we had contiguous borders, we would have had really a much bigger role to play as far as Afghanistan is concerned. And we have been trying to make this access through Chabahar, and the reasons why it has not gone forward at the pace that it could have or should have, that also I've explained, but I think we really need to see how we can take it forward. But I don't think that it is such a black and white issue. I think whichever government comes there, they will need India. As far as the gains of the last 20 years that have been obtained in terms of rights of women, rights of girl child, for education, for work, protection of minorities. I think all these aspects we should work towards along with our partners there to ensure that they are reflected well as far as any future constitution or document is concerned. And of course, continue to work with in different formats. The United States has now invited India to be one of the players. And I think that is a good move, and we should make full use of that opportunity. Frank.
Absolutely. General?
Yes, I tend to agree with what the ambassador has said. And the point which Dr. Mishra mentioned, certainly there is a point in what he is saying, but notwithstanding that, in international politics and in international relations, there is no doubt you have to deal with the government of the day, whether you like, dislike, half like, that is a separate issue. The question is whether, if and when, whatever power structure Afghanistan internally throws up, we will have to perhaps deal with that power structure. And therefore, it is better to be mentally prepared to deal with that kind of power structure. That is number one. Also, utilize that particular country to the best of your interest of your own country. Now, we cannot now sit quiet to say, no, he has got bigger say, and China is doing this, and China has got so much of muscle power and things like that, and therefore I have no chance. No, I don't think that is the correct option, because as far as we are concerned, we have a chance, and this is an ongoing process. I think this kind of so-called competition, or perhaps looking after our own interest into the quagmire of the international relationship and complexities of international relationships, that we will have to deal with it. And I think our diplomats have dealt it enough. Our military people have also dealt it enough. And I am very sure that we will be able to work it out. After all, like it or not, Taliban government was in power. And at that time, I think it was not a shut-up call from India. So at that point of time, also, I think Indians were there and Indians were working there, and Indian minorities existed there. So these are also a statement of fact. So as far as dealing with the government of the day is concerned, it's a statement of fact. You cannot wish away. That's what I would like to submit.
All right. And Amalinder Mishra, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
Thank you. First of all, I mean, we can't gauge into the crystal ball and say that this is how future is going to look like. We still have to wait and see who takes over charge in Kabul, whether it is going to be a consensual government, which includes the current democratically elected part as well as the Taliban, whether there is going to be a completely new constitution, whether we are going to see the reformed natives, that is the Taliban, following on the footsteps of whatever goodwill has been created in the last 20 years. So in the absence of having that particular understanding, that wisdom, we simply can't say how the future is going to look like. So everything depends on how Taliban is going to behave, the nature of government that we are going to have, whether it is going to go back to year zero or whether it is going to walk and look forward. And India can only position itself accordingly. But there is something else that we need to take into account as well. We are fighting on so many different fronts. The answer to our problems lies just next door. So if we can settle the problems with Pakistan, then our access to Central Asia becomes so much easier. Maybe perhaps it's about time we explored that particular possibility. Although I have been a pessimist in my previous comment, but what I would suggest therefore again here is that maybe this is something that we are not exploring or not. We have more in common with Pakistan than with Afghanistan. So why don't we do that? Why don't we move in that direction so that it becomes so much more easier, rather than looking at Chabaha, rather than looking at Iran, or rather than looking at Tajikistan? We have to focus our energy on Pakistan. I don't think it is going to be that difficult. They speak the same language, enjoy the same food, we enjoy the same culture, and there is so much in common. And 70 years, I don't think the current generation is so much bogged down by what had happened in the past. So that would be my takeaway. So let's touch what is just next door, and maybe we'll be surprised.
Okay, you seem to have piqued the interest of the other two panelists as well. So very quickly, I'm going to get a reaction from them both. Well, first, I'll start with the general, and then I'll come to the ambassador. General, very quickly.
See, it's a totally different debate, but certainly the things are that dealing with Pakistan is on, and the fact is that a lot has happened in the recent past, and there are a lot which is on the table, which cannot be disclosed and talked about. But certainly, Indian priority list, what Dr. Mishra has said, certainly India is going through following that priority list in no uncertain terms. I think our decision makers are quite clear on that.
All right. And Ambassador, final words from you on the program.
Yeah, just 2 points here, Frank. Number one, I think you might need to do another session on the issue that Dr. Mishra has raised. But the point that I would like to make is This would really imply what Dr. is saying, that India has not made the effort. And, I strongly dispute that, because India has made all the efforts every time. Just over the last 5 years, very quickly, on 26th May, when the inauguration of Prime Minister Modi took place, all the SARC members were invited, including Mr. Nawaz Sharif. Mr. Modi went on 25th of December 2015 to Pakistan, to Islamabad, to Lahore, Rawalpindi, etc., basically and extended a hand of friendship. I think there have been so many efforts made from our side. Problem is not efforts from our side. Problem is terrorism emanating from Pakistan. I think steps that need to be taken are basically from Pakistan. If they agree, if they decide to abjure terrorism, stop providing safe havens to terrorists, I think there is much greater possibility. I think lack of peace between India and Pakistan is not because of lack of efforts as far as India is concerned. India has made all efforts.
Points taken, Ambassador. We'll have to leave it at that. Thank you so much to all my panelists for joining me on the program and sharing your views and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that what happens in Afghanistan will surely affect the larger region. Stakes are high and we must act maturely, as the consequences are no less significant. The US's Afghan adventure has not worked. After trying for 2 decades, it seems like Washington is very quickly losing its appetite. The Taliban is now in control of two-thirds of Afghanistan and is just waiting for the US to make its exit to take control. There is a lot at stake for India as well. We have to try and protect and promote our investments, but our cards are limited. We have to work with like-minded partners and hope that our goodwill works. Well, that's it from me. See you again next time. But before I leave, let me thank you once again for being here. Remember to like and subscribe to Bharata First and ensure that you click on the bell and then all notifications on YouTube. Do follow the social media handles as well. I need your support now more so than ever. Please spread the word.